What do Santa's little helpers learn at school? The alphabet! Well, it's Christmas time, you know what that means. That's right, it's Star Wars time! Okay, so it doesn't seem right about that. In 1977, director George Lucas released what many consider to be the pinnacle of sci-fi movies, Star Wars. And it kicked ass! And several years later, he released a bunch of prequels, and they aren't as bad as a lot of people say, but yeah, they kind of suck. And then years later, he finally sold the rights to the Disney Corporation, and they well, let's be perfectly honest, intent on milking this thing for all it's worth. Not only do we have a new trilogy and a planned trilogy after that, but we also have spin-off movies, video games, and everything. Just milk it for all it's worth. Well, if you're gonna milk something, might as well be something that's good to begin with. And between the video games and the books, Star Wars has been such a rich source of material for an expanded universe, so yeah, there's a lot of potential for this franchise. And their first stab at it was Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Directed by J.J. Abrams, who you might remember as the director of Star Trek, another sci-fi franchise reboot. Episode 7 tells the story of a universe under threat by the First Order, a group of space Nazis intent on controlling the galaxy. And the key to the Resistance's victory seems to be hidden in the drives of a small robot, which is found by someone on a desert planet, who with the help of a plucky young person who doesn't want to get involved but totally gets involved, escapes in the Millennium Falcon, and this is starting to sound very familiar, isn't it? Okay, let's address the big elephant in the room. The plot of this is pretty much the first Star Wars. I mean, episode 1, you know, the first one that came out. A New Hope. Which, for some reason, is called episode 4 rather than episode 1. I mean, we have an elderly mentor who has a relationship with the villain and feels a lot of guilt for his past, and a wide-eyed innocent who must learn the ways of the Force in order to defeat the evil ones. It's pretty much as basic as plot as you can get, but it isn't entirely restricted to Star Wars either. I mean, it's basically the same plot as Lord of the Rings. We have a wide-eyed innocent who has to stop an evil invasive force with the help of an elderly mentor who is killed in the line of duty, who has a relationship with a past villain, with another hero who also has to own up to his responsibilities and join the fight for good. Rinse and repeat. Which is what I would say, except that's only content. Basic structure of the story. Context is a completely different thing. Yeah, both heroes are wide-eyed innocents lost on a desert planet, but they both want to get away for different reasons. One just wanted more than his provincial life and wanted to explore the stars, while the other one is essentially drawn into it by some kind of force beyond her control. Finn and Han Solo both have very similar story arcs in that they're trying to avoid this conflict, but are dragged into it anyway. But their personalities are very different. Han Solo's very sarcastic and dry, and Finn's kind of a bit more energized and optimistic at times. On top of that, one's a rogue who just wants nothing to do with it, is just looking out for himself, while the other used to be a soldier for the First Order and is now turning against what he sees as an evil empire. And he's trying to stay out of it not because he's just in it for himself, but because he's afraid and knows what the First Order is capable of. But hey, if you want to ignore what the characters are actually going through and base your criticisms entirely off the Wikipedia plot synopsis, then yes, they're exactly the same film. And they have pretty much the same things that worked about the first one as well. First of all, being the hero. Everybody's pretty likable in this. I know some people don't like Rey, but personally I kind of find her interesting. The sense there's a bit more to her that's actually compelling and you kind of want to see where it goes. It's not like, say, the Resident Evil films where Alice just has all these superpowers and is allowed to do whatever the fuck she wants and is like super badass Mary Sue. It just comes across as boring. Here her powers are kind of introduced gradually. It's kind of like there's something sleeping inside her, and it's not so much a compelling character, but more an interesting story just to kind of follow this thread and see where it's going. Both Finn and another pilot introduced, Poe Dameron, are also kind of likable, and you do want to see where their stories are going. Poe doesn't get much screen time, but Finn gets a bit more, and his story is very interesting, and again, it's something we haven't seen in the Star Wars series yet, and that's the idea of someone on the bad side turning good. We also have a great climax in this. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't it the same as the first one? No, not at all. True, we do have teams of X-Wings trying to blow up the base by hitting its weak spot. But here's the thing, if you actually watch the film isn't focused on the X-Wings. We cut back to them every now and again. It's more a ticking clock as the heroes are actually doing stuff on the planet. And there is like this rush to get out there before the whole thing blows up. It'd be more like if you had the scenes on the Death Star but kept cutting to the X-Wings, like these are two things going on at the same time. And as a result, the finale of episode 7 feels like a much more personal one. The final lightsaber fight just feels very brutal. I mean, we've seen guys hitting swords together before, but something about this just felt a lot more Games of Thrones-y, if that makes any sense. Just two people whack each other with laser swords and just trying to destroy each other. Personally, I prefer the action the prequels because they felt like they were shot much more like a martial arts film. Whereas here it just feels a lot more brutal and intense. I also like the way it's shot as well. There's just some really fantastic use of lighting in this one scene. But there's one thing that makes this stand above the original Star Wars film. And that's the villain, Kylo Ren. A lot of people have complained about this guy and said that he's very whiny, but I don't see it that way. See, it's a fine line between someone who's whiny and a character who's tortured. Anakin was whiny. He wouldn't just stop complaining. But when Kylo Ren's trying to deal with his problems, he isn't complaining about it. He's asking for strength to do what he feels is right. It's actually a very fascinating take on the idea of the Force. I mean, we've seen characters pull to the dark side before, but what about someone who's on the dark side who sees the light as something evil, that's something that's pulling him away from what needs to be done? It's a complete subversion of the Anakin Skywalker story, and as a result, it's fascinating to watch. See, the way I look at it is, a whiny character is someone who blames everyone else. It's always someone else's fault. It's not my fault that everything's going wrong, it's their fault. They should have to make me feel better, which is what Anakin does. He bitches and moans, he blames the Jedi Council and Obi-Wan for his problems, rather than taking responsibility and feeling like it's his own personal defeat. I'd be much more sympathetic to him if he was, blaming himself. If he saw it as his own personal failure, and he's trying to get stronger because of that, and because of that reason, he's pulled to the dark side, which he sees as a way of gaining that power to help more people. But no, just piss and moan about how everyone else is such a meanie head, and I'm the only one who matters. Ren doesn't have that problem. He isn't blaming everyone else. That scene where he's praying to the head of Darth Vader, which, ew, he isn't crying over it and asking it to deal with his problems. He's asking for the strength to do what he feels is right, in the same way that someone would pray to God. And the way that story is realized, I'm not going to ruin for you just yet. I also like how his emotions are constantly out of control, like those outbursts of anger. It doesn't feel as much as a tantrum, more like he's suppressing these emotions and can't fully control them, and then they just kind of burst out without him meaning to. There's also what I feel is the significance of the helmet. It's kind of like a shield that keeps like this raw emotion contained. Like his actual self is like this raw nerve, and he's just trying to lock it away, and he feels like it's his shield, it's protecting him. So as you can probably tell, I really like Kylo Ren. I think he's probably the best villain in Star Wars. Darth Vader comes close, but a lot of his development comes from retrospect, what we learned about him in the prequels. And you know how I feel about that. So let's go to the final rundown. I love the action in the finale, I love the main characters, and I love the villain. So for me, it's an 8 out of 10. Most of my problems with this film mainly come from nitpicks. For example, why are they called the Resistance? Shouldn't they be like the New Republic? It feels like they chose it because it sounds like rebellion, but they're the people in control now. They're the leaders. They're not the Resistance anymore. They are the main guys. You're not a resistance force anymore. You don't have to rely on guerrilla tactics. It also does kind of bug me how everyone's using TIE fighters and X-Wings again. I'd rather see something new. Like, for example, the clone trooper starships in the prequels, they look like they've got the DNA of the X-Wings, but you can see how it's completely different. It's just like this weird connection between these two things that are the same but also different, whereas here it's just a new version of an X-Wing. Show us new types of wings. How about like a U-Wing or P-Wing, Z-Wing, anything? You got a lot of letters of the alphabet to choose from here. You don't have to just stick to X. At least throw in a B-Wing. Favorite ship keeps getting snubbed. So yeah, I really enjoy this movie. I think it's better than the original. It's not quite up to par with Empire Strikes Back, and I feel like I've still got like more of that nostalgia feeling for the original trilogy, but it's definitely up there. It's a really good film. At the time of making this video, the new Star Wars comes out tonight, which I won't be seeing because I'm not an idiot. Screw up Wednesday night screening, I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna go watch in the morning when I'm awake. So until I get around to looking at that film, take care now, and may the Force be with you.